इस बार बहुत फोकस किया है कि स्टेट गवर्नमेंट फाइनेंसेस मैनेज नहीं हो रहे हैं एफआरपी। What is the problem of employment, or what are the issues which we have apart from female labor force participation rate? Employability of workforce is an equal problem as compared to employment of workforce. लोगों को नौकरी तो चाहिए, बट क्या उनके पास स्किल है उस नौकरी के लिए? क्या? See, ultimately, if you read about migration, this is how cities develop. Because agriculture beyond a point does not provide you productivity, income does not rise. If you want dynamic options, you'll have to move to the cities. Now, do you realize that in poverty measurement itself is highly controversial? What was the last committee which had given a methodology for poverty estimation?
UPSC doesn't punish less study, it punishes unchanged mistakes. If the same issues keep repeating, your prep isn't improving. It's just getting longer. Recall drops in mocks, answers stay generic, elimination errors repeat. Current affairs doesn't convert into mains points. These are signs your preparation needs correction. That's not an effort problem, it's a system problem. Vision IAS Delhi GS Foundation is built to fix this early. Sequenced classes, timely tests, built-in revision, mentorship reviews. PT 365 and Mains 365 make current affairs usable in answers. If UPSC 2027 is your target, start with a structure that makes improvement predictable. Batches starting from 3rd February at 8 am at GTB Nagar and 6th February at 11 am, 13th February at 8 am and 24th February at 5 pm at Karol Bagh. For more information, visit our website or call us on the given numbers.
Good evening. You have an idea about what the survey is? 2 घंटे से तो बैठे हो. What is the survey और क्या होगा अभी? You must have an expectation when you came here. Huh? Highlights of the survey. Anything else? Highlight होती क्या है? Highlight game के बाद में होती है. See, first I'm not going to discuss the survey. That is, there is no discussion on what exactly has been mentioned in the survey. Survey की जो classes शुरू हो रही हैं परसों से, it has been divided into 3 sections. So 6 chapters, the first session which sir took, 6 next chapters, Sunil sir, and last 6 chapters I have to take. So I'm going to tell you what exactly is being covered on those 6 chapters, and you can read it on your own. That is the option always available. If you can't read it on your own, 4th से class शुरू होगी. Timing वो brochure देख लेना. Like there's a course. So this is an overview of what exactly is happening in the survey so that you can use it to your best possible advantage, both in prelims and mains. Economics के जो first 6 chapters हैं survey में, that is the macroeconomic section. The next 6 chapter are the real economy, agriculture, industry, services. The next 6 chapter is whatever is the impact of economy on the life of people. That is rural development, urban development, employment, skilling, artificial intelligence, and the last chapter के जो uncertain environment, whatever is happening, what should India do? These 6 chapters are very important for your main syllabus, both in paper 2 and paper 3. One by one, I'll tell you how to integrate them with your notes, whatever you are preparing and how you're preparing. Survey as a document has to be read completely, but is not to be read in vacuum. Whatever you have done, for example, you would have done your macroeconomics and Indian economy part either from classes or you would have read some reference book. These are the two major sources along with newspaper. तो उनके चैप्टर के साथ अगर ये चैप्टर पढ़ोगे, then you'll be able to score better. Because a lot of things would be missing in your notes or would be missing in your newspaper analysis. ये सारे gap fill कर देगा survey. So the first thing which you have already done, this is something which is expected. The first thing is that you have done your basics both for macro and the Indian economy part. In fact, this section of the last 6 chapters has a lot of overlap with the paper 2 also. पेपर 1 पेपर 2 के लिए बहुत रेलेवेंस है. एजुकेशन जो सेकंड पार्ट में भी था, एजुकेशन स्कीम्स, हेल्थ केयर सेक्टर, स्किलिंग स्कीम्स, ये डायरेक्ट क्वेश्चन आएंगे इसके. Now this is your basics which you have done. Now this is the first major part which has to be revised. तो इसका हम वो क्लासेस में रिवीजन भी होगा पहले. This is your basic part from which questions do come, but this is not the only preparation which you have to do. ये starting का first step है. On top of it, what we do for economics is you do it with newspaper. I'll tell you the pattern के question बनता कैसे है. The basics of macro and Indian economy will either ask the concepts or the Indian economy part will ask the application of the concepts, including the schemes and programs. इसमें बहुत help करेगा the survey part. So this is what you have prepared. Whether you have prepared it from class notes or whether you have prepared from a reference book. ये step 1 है preparation का. Step 2 is when you read the newspaper, so that macroeconomics का term is again repeated, whether it is inflation, fiscal deficit, growth, development. So your revision gets better. The second part of the newspaper is Indian economy, whatever issues are present, you get to analyze that particular thing from the newspaper. The editorial section is mostly the analysis of all the topics which have happened in the last 1 year. वो consistently हो रहा है और वो हमारे syllabus में है. So these are the 2 stages of preparation. That basics have been covered. I know the ABCD. The ABCD is written in a language. I can make sense of the language. The third part is what is the key to solve the answer in the paper finally. This is where your economic survey is going to give you 2 things. Across these range of topics जो syllabus हैं paper 1 और paper 2, paper 3 का including prelims, the survey is going to comprehensively cover if you see the topic list itself. So the first thing is, this is something which is compiling all the things at one place, along with authenticity of data कि ये Indian economy में हो रहा है. That is what is happening in last 1 year. Not just last 1 year, largely economy में यही हो रहा है. 1 year में तो I'll tell you what exactly do they cover, but largely economy का status ये है. This is what is the status of Indian economy, जिसके basic यहाँ पढ़े थे, जिसकी analysis यहाँ तोड़ के पढ़ी थी पूरे साल में. You had broken down the analysis into different parts because the newspaper is not meant for UPSC preparation. Newspaper is for general awareness of the people about the society around them. You had taken out some parts which were important for your preparation, but that was not consolidated at one place. Current affair magazines, PD 365, Mains 365 helped you do that. Ideally, वो खुद पढ़ के करना था. What the survey is doing is what is happening पूरा, the status has been now given to you. On top of it, the survey does not talk about the analysis part. Survey is mostly driven of what the regime is. उसके हिसाब से ही survey ज़्यादातर लिखा है. Analysis ज़्यादा नहीं मिलेगी इसमें कभी भी, because analysis also goes the negative direction कि there's a lot of wrong things that are happening. So they don't talk about analysis a lot. Analysis आपको यहीं पे मिलेगा. But what they do talk about is what is the government doing. So if you talk about agriculture में if you read just a brief overview कि agriculture में they said इंडिया में क्रॉप्स की प्रोडक्शन तो बहुत है पर प्रोडक्टिविटी नहीं है. This is what the survey wrote in one line. Whatever the productivity enhancements have come, they have come from the marine sector and the livestock sector. This is what they've written. वो क्यों नहीं है वो नहीं मिलेगा सर्वे में. Survey is not going to tell you why productivity is a problem, but how to solve that productivity problem. Survey is going to talk about कि irrigation में स्कीम ये कर लो, seeds में R&D ये कर लो, गवर्नमेंट की स्कीम ये है और वो करना ये चाह रहे हैं. So the missing part from the newspaper was they don't tell what the government is doing at a consolidated place. They don't give you schemes, they don't give you programs, they don't give you any mission statements. This is one source which is going to give you all. You read about skilling, I'll tell you how they have done that. You read about employment, you read about education, you read about healthcare. They're going to talk about all the schemes that this is what the government is doing. They don't talk about the problem. They will give you data और डेटा के बाद बताएंगे गवर्नमेंट ने ये किया. डेटा में वो एनालिसिस मिसिंग होगा. There have been times when the analysis was used to be presented when the survey used to come in 2 volumes. Now the analysis part is gone. So they are going to tell you what is happening with giving you data. उसको गुड बैड नहीं बोलेंगे और बोलेंगे गवर्नमेंट ये कर रही है. तो जो गवर्नमेंट कर रही है उसको आप इससे रिलेट कर सकते हो. गवर्नमेंट तभी कुछ करेगी जब प्रॉब्लम होगी. हम प्रॉब्लम डिस्कस नहीं करेंगे. हम बताएंगे गवर्नमेंट क्या करी. I'll tell you topic by topic what they have done in each of the topics, the last 6 chapters specifically. That is the overview which I'm going to give you so that you can use it appropriately. Now, not all data is important. Whatever data which fits in your analysis is important. Whatever data after analysis gives you what the government is doing is important. कोई भी question जो UPSC का आता है, this is a major challenge in paper 2 and paper 3. What we prepare and how exactly this particular concept is going to fit in. Whenever we prepare any topic, we talk about the basics of the topic and basics में हम उसकी history जानने की कोशिश करते हैं. That what is the employment scenario and how did we reach this point? Why there was no manufacturing, why there were services, why agriculture still have the most people, because की history हुई. When we go from history, we come to the present. We talk about what exactly are the issues in the present and what are the challenges if something is being done about it. Issue is the fundamental design problem and challenges is when it is implemented, what challenges do we face? These are the two issues which we cover comprehensively. तो क्लास में अधिकतर ये पढ़ाया जाता है, कोई भी सोर्स बुक में ये लिखा होता है. Once you analyze the present, one thing is that we are better than history. And the second concept is there is still, it needs reform. And then we talk about way forward, including government action. I'll tell you कि fundamentally paper 2 to paper 3 में number कम क्यों आते हैं. What happens is this has been covered holistically. चाहे क्लास में पढ़ा हो चाहे रेफरेंस बुक में हो, आपने समझी वो चीज़ और आपने उसके इश्यूज समझ लिए. इश्यूज चैलेंजेस को आपने दोबारा पढ़ा न्यूज़पेपर से. And the newspaper is talking about this. So the domain of thinking is this. This is how you frame any particular topic. कि food security की बात है तो why people are still hungry in the country is what you're going to talk about. Why there is a problem of nutrition in the country, you're still going to talk about. How did you start? There is a PDS. PDS has certain challenges. How can we solve the challenges? क्या और क्या problem है इसमें? Leakage क्यों हो रही है? This is what is the domain of study which you have usually done, which is done for any particular topic, paper 1, 2, 3. 1 में social issues is what I'm talking about. यहाँ पे question आता नहीं है कभी. Question आता है यहाँ पे. Question will not say how NFSA is problematic in its implementation, discuss. Question will say how NFSA has solved the problem of hunger. Because whatever issues that are present today, हम history से तो पहले से तो better है. Yes, there is a long way to go, but we're still better than what exactly was happening before. So 2013 में NFSA has been passed. The situation was bad before 2013. It has improved after 2013, but इतनी अच्छी नहीं हुई जो हम expect कर रहे हैं. ये है what should be. This is what is what is better than what was. ये what was और what is पे सारे question है paper 2 to paper 3 पे. This particular thing, if you see, you are only going to get from, और कोई सोर्स मेंशन नहीं करेगा. आप किसी भी एडिटोरियल में पढ़ो और एनी न्यूज़पेपर यू पिक अप, वेदर हिंदू एंड इंडियन एक्सप्रेस, दे आर ओनली गोइंग टू टॉक अबाउट दिस. दे आर ओनली गोइंग टू बी क्रिटिकल. दिस इज व्हाई आई सेड कि बहुत क्रिटिकल हो जाता है न्यूज़पेपर रीडिंग. क्रिटिकल होना कोई बुरी बात नहीं है, बट दूसरी साइड भी समझना भी एक बात है. Being critical is what the newspapers have to be because they are aiming for what should be. They are not there for clapping for the government के हाँ अच्छा किया. कोई भी एक अच्छा जर्नलिस्टिक सोर्स वो क्लैप नहीं करेगा, बहुत कम करेगा. इसलिए गवर्नमेंट बोलेगी कि मीडिया अगेंस्ट है, अगर अगेंस्ट है तो. यू गेट व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू से. मैं नहीं बोल रहा अगेंस्ट है, मैं बता रहा हूँ कि क्वेश्चन कहाँ आता है. I'm not giving you an opinion on what is the state of media in this country. You know very well if you have been reading the newspaper. This is why the credibility is mostly in the reading the newspaper only. Other forms of media that is current affairs oriented, you know what exactly the status there. Is there any analysis? You better know that. Is this clear? कि हमने करा क्या, इश्यूज तो इन्होंने भी समझा दिए, बेसिक हमने पहले पढ़ लिए हैं, सर्वे ने हमें इस डायरेक्शन में ले गए जिसमें हमें आंसर लिखना है, इसलिए रीडिंग ईच एंड एवरी चैप्टर देन बिकम्स इंपॉर्टेंट. हाउ डू यू रीड ईच एंड एवरी चैप्टर? यू डोंट रीड सर्वे कवर टू कवर के हमें बस ये बुक खत्म करनी है. सर्वे के टॉपिक हैं, तो जब हम ये टॉपिक यहाँ पढ़ेंगे हम फिर ये यहाँ पे ये करेंगे. Is this making sense? I am going to read about rural development only when I am discussing poverty in my notes. Is when I am reading from the newspaper about poverty, then only rural development will make sense for me. Otherwise, if I read rural development and then AI and then urban development, I will never register anything. So I have to do this first step. I have already done this second step, whether I've done by making notes from the newspaper or I have done it from a particular source, that is PT 365 or monthly revision source. उसके बाद जब ये टॉपिक यहाँ आएगा, वो फिर आपको यहाँ से पढ़ना है. ये आपका यूज बेटर हो जाएगा, आपको समझ आएगा पढ़ क्या रहे हो और फिर उसको यूज कैसे करना है. इफ यू डोंट डू 1+2, दिस 3 विल नॉट मेक सेंस बिकॉज द क्वेश्चंस आर हियर. फिर आप वो क्रिटिकली रह जाओगे और आपसे लिखना होगा ही नहीं, कभी भी नहीं होगा, बिकॉज यू ऑलरेडी नो द रॉन्ग पॉइंट्स के ये नहीं होना चाहिए. बट क्वेश्चन वो पूछता नहीं है. क्वेश्चन हमेशा पूछता है कि हम प्रेजेंट से बेटर हैं, वो सर्वे ही बताता है हम प्रेजेंट से बेटर है. सर्वे भी अच्छा लिखा जा सकता है अगर वो दोनों चीजें साथ में कर दे, बट साथ में करना एनालिसिस can go against the government also. So this is something which you can see as a challenge for the one who's writing the survey. So what he's actually done is, he's done something which will help you clear the exam. Forget what is happening in the economy, what will be the real challenge or not. Exam के लिए हमारे लिए सही काम हो गया, क्योंकि ये वाली sources, ये plus ये आपको कहीं नहीं मिलेगा. And problem is when you read schemes, the schemes are read in vacuum. Why? Because 500 schemes at one point. Schemes का भी एक context है. Whether it is rural development scheme, it is urban development, every scheme has a context. That context is what first has to make sense, then only the scheme will make sense. तो वो scheme भी तभी समझ आएगी चाहे वो prelims की पढ़ो चाहे mains की पढ़ो. I'll tell you how exactly things are working here, कि कैसे उन्होंने किया. Is this clear? Any doubt how you have to cover the survey? अब ये part हमारा है या तो खुद, you can read on your own. If you are strong on this and you can relate the two, you can read on your own. That's not a problem. You have that 730 pages which are available online for free. You can download it and start reading. Or if you don't understand and it's difficulty in mixing all the three parts in order to understand your question भी कैसे आएगा, फिर वो class start हो रही है. So that is your choice how exactly you are comfortable with part 1 and part 2. But I have to tell you how to use it. So cover to cover has to be read. अब इसमें एक और issue है कि if I read cover to cover or do I read the highlights of the survey? Now you see in this context, will the highlights help you? If you think yes, go for it. If you think no, पहले समझ लेते हैं फिर highlights इसमें integrate कर लेंगे. Your choice. But that question should not be in mind कि survey है क्या और use कैसे करना है. I'm telling you paper 1, paper 2, paper 3, including the essay. This is going to give you number of dimensions. जो डायमेंशन जो ऑथेंटिक है कि डेटा में प्रॉब्लम नहीं हो रही है, एनालिसिस में प्रॉब्लम नहीं हो रही है, गवर्नमेंट की स्कीम्स में प्रॉब्लम नहीं हो रही, ये पूरा पार्ट एक्सप्लेन करेगा. दिस इज व्हाई इट्स अ बल्की डॉक्यूमेंट, बिकॉज एवरी चैप्टर इट्स टॉकिंग रफली 30 to 40, 50 पेजेस. So 50 pages में they are covering all dimensions, mostly covering those dimensions which I think are important. I'll show you how. Is this making sense? Any doubts you have here? What you have to read and how you have to read. Now coming to the chapters, I'll show you this one by one in chapters. Now the chapter which number 12 से लेकर 16 तक, 16 part 1 and 16 part 2. First topic is employment and skill development. This is why I said macroeconomy वाला part first session में हुआ, जहाँ पे he covered the first 6 chapters which were what? The state of the economy, the growth development picture. Then was your money management. Fourth was your inflation. Fifth was your managing external sector. And sixth was your managing finances of the government. Center government, state government. इस पर बहुत focus किया है कि state government finances manage नहीं हो रहे हैं FRBM में. These 6 chapters. Next 6 chapters become agriculture, industry, services, all those sectors, what is happening. So वो real economy आ गई. First वाला आपका how any economy works, especially India कैसे काम कर रही है. Second, real economy. Third is what is the impact on lives of people. At the end of the day, people are what matter. तो उनकी लाइफ कैसे इंप्रूव हो रही है. तो पहले है कि क्या उनके पास जॉब है कि नहीं है. In this chapter of employment and skill, what usually do we read in employment? You've read employment, unemployment? What do we usually read? What do we read in employment, unemployment? Labor force then? अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट लेबर फोर्स का मीनिंग पहले तो सबका, उसके बाद टाइप ऑफ अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट, देन employment elasticity, one of the concepts, meaning terms में, then what, issues why unemployment. Now what the survey has done, survey has started with, these are the 5 topics which they have covered in employment skilling. I'll tell you separately. First they've told you what exactly is the status of employment in the country. Status में 2 पे उन्होंने features बता दिए, what is LFPR and what exactly is the unemployment rate, and these 2 concepts they have shown you a trend, okay, what is happening. Remember, survey will always tell you what is happening. What is happening में why का part missing होगा, but government क्या कर रही है वो बताएंगे. This is why I was telling you why वाला part newspaper बताता है. When we analyze this, they found out that India has 2 major issues. They did not say it on those terms, but they said what is being done about it. So they highlighted 2 issues. First was that we don't have significant participation by women. So what they've done is, with numbers they've shown participation of women is increasing in the economy, but they did not talk about कि poor क्यों है वो number. वो अब newspaper करता है. If you read newspaper for 1 year, you will come to know so many articles being written why women are not participating in the economy. So they mentioned what is happening and what we are doing about it. इसमें उन्होंने लिख दिया कि government क्या कर रही है and what needs to be done. They have drawn a particular box, and in this box they have given 6 steps. It's a complete answer that what needs to be done to improve the female labor force participation rate. वो पूरा का पूरा box आपका mains का answer बन गया, पूरा given format, because those 6 steps you'll not find in the newspaper. Because newspaper when we'll talk about issues वो 1 या 2 बता देंगे, वो 6 के 6 साथ में वो institutional आपको structure नहीं देगा. इन्होंने वो structure दे दिया. Second thing they've talked about, what is the problem of employment, or what are the issues which we have apart from female labor force participation rate? Unwilling labor force का issue नहीं है, वो 55% है. Jobless growth. See, jobless growth एक ऐसा टॉपिक है, फिर उसके लिए 30 साल की हिस्ट्री पढ़ के फिर बताना पड़ेगा जॉब्स कैसे क्रिएट होंगी. वो सर्वे कभी नहीं करेगा, वो फिर मानना पड़ जाएगा कि प्रॉब्लम है. द बिगेस्ट प्रॉब्लम इज दैट यू हैव इनफॉर्मल लेबर. सो दे टॉक अबाउट, इसी डेटा से दे हैव ड्रॉन टाइप ऑफ एम्प्लॉयमेंट से कि कितने टाइप की होती है. इनफॉर्मल लेबर इज सिग्निफिकेंट इन द कंट्री. सो दे हैव नॉट मेंशन्ड व्हाट एग्जैक्टली इज व्हाई वी आर इनफॉर्मल. They have mentioned what exactly are the steps government is taking to cover this informal labor. They have mentioned schemes, they have mentioned data. E-Shram portal से हमने उनको register करा लिया, उसके बाद हमने उनको ये वाली scheme दे दी. This is what they have mentioned. Why informal is not what they have talked about. So if you see what they have done, by telling you the status, I should have told you why the status is like this. But instead I picked up 2 issues and I told you how you can solve that issues, or what the government is doing to solve the issue. Third thing from this data they have drawn, now see, ये indirectly hint किया कि job कहाँ से आएगी. So they have not told you what to do. They have talked about manufacturing में jobs ज़्यादातर size कौन सी industry में है. Small industry has more, large industry has more. They have given facts. The second, what is the type of industry that is acquiring more. They have given 8 sectors where there is manufacturing jobs which have been created. This is a signal that you need more here. And finally, they have told you geographical distribution of those industries. So now this becomes a fact sheet which helps me frame my arguments if there are arguments of jobless, or arguments of lopsided development, manufacturing development not happening, or regional development not happening. This is not why, this is just the number. तो आपको फैक्ट शीट मिल गई जिससे आप वो बना सकते हो आंसर. 2 आंसर तो आपको डायरेक्ट मिल गए. What is the government doing about informalization? What is the government doing about female labor force participation? Or what do you think the steps should be? ये भी नॉन पॉलिटिकल है सब, तो मेरे को सर्वे में वो एनालिसिस देना बहुत आसान है. बट इफ आई से दैट द गवर्नमेंट स्कीम इज अ प्रॉब्लम, दिस इज समथिंग आई कांट डू हियर. बीइंग पार्ट ऑफ द मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ फाइनेंस, द सीए विल नेवर से कि गवर्नमेंट की मेक इन इंडिया या आत्मनिर्भर भारत गलत है. वो बोलेंगे ये हो रहा है, ये और इंप्रूव हो सकता है, आउटलुक ये है. These are the first few chapters. Then the next 2 chapters is what they have told how the government is already solving problems by making certain concrete steps, जो structural reform है. One structural reform they have talked about is, in detail, they have talked about, UPSC asked this question last year in mains, what are the 4 labor codes and what are the features of those 4 labor codes, and also discuss the challenges associated with them. What they have done in survey, They talked about labor codes and their impact on the economy. एक और वो बना दिया, 4 labor code है और उनका ये impact है. The next thing what they've done is they've talked about in detail about what actually are. Here they have drawn a complete analysis. They have first defined what are gig workers, then they have given numbers, what are their problems, and then they have talked about how to solve the problem. यहाँ काफी अच्छा डेटा के बाद उन्होंने बताया कि 40% ऑफ द गिग वर्कर्स वी सर्वेड फाउंड आउट कि 15,000 ज्यादा नहीं कमा पा रहे हैं, सोशल सिक्योरिटी मिसिंग है, ये मिसिंग है, वो मिसिंग है, वो पूरा डिस्कस किया फिर. So if you see from this whole picture, how I have drawn the employment picture, what is happening in the country, out of which you've got 4 ready-made answers. तो अब आपने जब टॉपिक पढ़ा एम्प्लॉयमेंट का, हमने पहले एक ये टॉपिक प्रिपेयर कर लिया, एक टॉपिक ये प्रिपेयर हुआ, थर्ड वाज दिस एंड फोर्थ वाज दिस, फिफ्थ वाज माय फैक्ट शीट which I might put in my notes or which I might not put in depending on priority के क्वेश्चन कितना आ सकता है. तो पूरा चैप्टर मेरा ब्रेक डाउन हो गया, मैंने 45 पेज पढ़ने कैसे हैं. This is what is the overview. If you do it for all chapters, you will be very well aware how to use this and how exactly to write answers using this. If you read it cover to cover without understanding, कभी समझ नहीं आएगा हो क्या रहा है, बस ये समझ आएगा कि कुछ पढ़ा पढ़ा है, familiarity आएगी, use नहीं आएगा. This is how these 5 chapters or 5 topics have been broken down. Now, if you pick that chapter, you will be able to make sense of what is happening. Now, behind these data or behind the impact of labor code or even informal steps, I could have given certain methodologies के मैंने कैसे बात बोली. I could give some economic models that this is how I'm making this argument. Now, you know from the nature of the exam, those arguments will never be important for us. Those particular mathematical models are never important. Prelims का आपको पता है क्या पूछना है, उन्होंने schemes पूछनी है इस part से. Mains में whatever these 4 topics are, you can relate everywhere. चाहे वो inclusive growth से relate कर लो, industrial policy से relate कर लो, the first topic growth, development, planning, employment issues से discuss कर लो. चारों जगह वो question आ सकता है. Is this making sense how exactly they've covered this? These are the 4-5 dimensions which are there from this particular employment portion. The ones which I just wrote down. State of employment से हमने सेक्टोरल और जेंडर डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन देखा, उसके बाद हमने फिर LFPR की बात करी, इनफॉर्मलाइजेशन की बात करी. Then we talked about manufacturing jobs, measures to improve quality of work. This is what is in line with labor code. And finally, gig economy and informal work का क्या problem है. This is your coverage of unemployment. Now the second is when you understand what is unemployment, you now come to improving that is skilling. Employability of workforce is an equal problem as compared to employment of workforce. ये लोगों को नौकरी तो चाहिए, बट क्या उनके पास स्किल है उस नौकरी के लिए, क्या नहीं है. Now in skilling, what exactly do you think could be the problem, or what exactly could be discussed? Is this labor employment clear? अब skilling में क्या हुआ होगा? Certification issue, anything else? What they have done in skilling is they've started with this particular topic. First, they'll talk about status of what is skilling in the country और इसका डेटा देंगे. स्किलिंग से हमें 2 इशू सबसे बड़े, एक इशू मेजर जो समझ आया, एंड दिस इज व्हाट दे हैव डिस्कस्ड इन डिटेल, नॉट टेलिंग द व्हाई रीजन बट हाउ टू इंप्रूव इट एंड व्हाट द गवर्नमेंट इज डूइंग. अगेन, व्हाई इज नॉट कवर्ड इन एनी टॉपिक, व्हाट द गवर्नमेंट इज डूइंग अबाउट इट एंड व्हाट एग्जैक्टली कैन बी डन. These 2 things have been covered. The biggest problem from this data we have drawn is, this status is that there is a supply mismatch, supply demand mismatch. That is what skill we are supplying and what skill is demanded. Before, this is the critical issue which they understand. Before that, they also talk about, is there any issue with supply of skill? स्टेटस से हमने वाई नहीं बताया क्या हो रहा है, हमने 2 इश्यूज उठाए कि एक सप्लाई में भी शायद इशू है और जो सप्लाई स्किल का हो रहा है वो शायद डिमांडेड नहीं है. नाउ सी व्हाट टॉपिक्स दे हैव एक्चुअली कवर्ड इन स्किलिंग. फर्स्ट थिंग दे टॉक अबाउट इज that how do we improve the skilling of youth. This is where they say start early. This is where they talk about vocational education right with the school curriculum. They try to explain कि जल्दी start होने से क्या होगा. Now this can be linked in all 3 papers, paper 1, paper 2, paper 3. That how can we improve our education system so that employability of the candidates improve. The second thing they've talked about is, once they've done it in school, what is the role of apprenticeship. दिस द सेकेंड थिंग विच दे हैव डिस्कस्ड. वंस दे सेड कि यूथ को पहले स्कूल में पढ़ाना है, फिर अप्रेंटिसशिप का रोल है, तो हमारा सप्लाई साइड ठीक हो जाएगा. इन दोनों में व्हाट एग्जैक्टली इज द गवर्नमेंट डूइंग, एंड आर देयर एनी स्टेट स्पेसिफिक एग्जांपल? फॉर एग्जांपल, इन वन ऑफ द बॉक्सेस दे हैव एक्सप्लेन कि ओडिशा गवर्नमेंट ने आईटीआई कैसे इंप्रूव किया है. The revolution of ITIs in Odisha is what they have given example. So whenever they'll tell you what has to be done, they offer two types of examples. One is they talk about state specific examples. These are the different states what they are doing. Second is they talk about international comparisons. US ने ये किया है, यूरोप में ये हुआ है, इस कंट्री में है, तो हम ये कॉपी कर सकते हैं. Both things they'll tell. Okay, state specific this is happening, internationally this is happening, so this is something which we can also copy. This is why reading the survey becomes a hectic exercise के बहुत सारी examples मिल जाते हैं, फिर वो लगता है सेम ही बात हो रही है. But if you read it one chapter and try to integrate with whatever basics you know, that will not be a problem. And trust me, these examples are the ones which get you more marks. आप एक बेसिक आंसर लिखते हो, उसमें 4 मार्क्स हैं, आप थोड़ा आर्ग्यूमेंट एक दो एक्स्ट्रा दे पाते हो, 4.5 तक जाता है, कभी 5 चला जाएगा. वो 6 तभी जाएगा जब आपके पास ये एग्जाम्पल हो. ये 1 मार्क अगर आपको 20 आंसर में चाहिए, तो छोटी छोटी मेहनत करनी पड़ती है. सो व्हेन यू लुक एट द टॉपर्स कॉपी, यू फाइंड आउट कि ऐसा क्या लिखा है जो हमें नहीं आता. वो एग्जाम्पल लिखा है जो शायद आपको आता था, बट आपको 20 के लिए याद नहीं था. It looks very small when you are reading the answer, but the effort behind it is huge. And it requires this type of a hard work where you are putting out those examples and then able to use it in the exam because it was integrated in the notes in the right manner. You might know everything, but able to produce it in the answer is what takes some practice, some effort. That has to be put in. Then after this particular skill of youth being the vocational education and apprenticeship, they talk about supply demand mismatch ko, how to solve. How can we solve this issue? In again, just like female labor force participation rate के इन्होंने 6 point दिए, supply demand mismatch का they have made a whole box and they talked about these are the 6 points how you can solve. They mention clearly giving headlines कि this is what exactly you have to do, this is how you can improve, कि जो हमने पढ़ाया है या जो सिखाया है वो इंडस्ट्री को भी चाहिए. This is what is the employability leading to employment. I made you employable. Now after making you employable, did you get employment or not? This is supply demand mismatch. तो पहले हमने उसको employable बनाया, फिर employable से हमने match कराई job. उसके लिए 6 points what we have to do, that's a box. Finally, they talk about two major issues in skilling which India has not been able to solve since long. Is one, what exactly is the, how do we make the financing sustainable? How do we find money for running the whole ecosystem? So they've given certain measures how to solve the financing issue of skilling because this has been a tremendous problem. Another problem when you said is certification. They said when we are running such a system, also giving them a lot of money, there has to be some level of अकाउंटेबिलिटी होनी चाहिए ना, क्या सिखाया और क्या जॉब मिली है नहीं मिली है, तो अकाउंटेबिलिटी कैसे मेंटेन करोगे. सो इफ यू सी व्हाट एग्जैक्टली हैज हैपेंड इन द स्किलिंग पार्ट ऑफ एम्प्लॉयमेंट चैप्टर 1, I talk about improving supply, I talk about improving supply and demand, and then I talk about the two generic issues. I don't tell you why it's a problem, I tell you how to solve it. So all these four I'm going to talk about, again, government, what they are doing, and how to solve, how you can, what steps you can take. This is roughly the 45-50 pages labor and skilling chapter. If you see from the overview, you have got roughly 4 to 5 dimensions from employment what you have to prepare. You've got 3 to 4 dimensions in skilling. आपके 9 dimensions के 9 question अब जो बन सकते हैं उसका आंसर prepared है from an authentic government source mentioning the schemes, data, everything at the same point. This is what the question will ask. The question will not focus only on के problem बताओ skilling की country में. वो ये पूछेगा कि हम कर क्या रहे हैं उन problems के बारे में. What are the different programs for skilling and what needs to be done to improve skilling. This is why this document of economic survey becomes critical because ये वाला information consolidated happens nowhere. Very less in the newspaper, and we have a habit while reading the newspaper that if the article is written by a minister or article is written by a secretary, there's a habit to skip that particular article because you know there will be no analysis in it. You know कि यहाँ पे सिर्फ गवर्नमेंट का गुणगान हुआ होगा, तो इसकी क्रेडिबिलिटी क्वेश्चन हो जाती है, तो वो तब पढ़ते नहीं है, बट पेपर वो पूछता है, तो इसीलिए फिर ये डॉक्यूमेंट बहुत काम आता है. Is it making sense? That was the first chapter. The second chapter here is the rural development. That is social progress from partner participation to partnership. When you talk about rural development, what exactly do you think are the topics to be covered here? ये भी बड़ा पेपर 2 पेपर 3 का इंटरेस्टिंग टॉपिक है. What topics do you read under rural development? Road infrastructure. Anything else? Agriculture. वो तो फिर स्ट्रक्चर होगा उसका. उसके अलावा devolution of funds, center state relations. Anything else? वो devolution of funds ज़्यादातर हम बात पंचायत की नहीं करते, अर्बन लोकल बॉडीज की होती है वो. I'll tell you, वो फाइनेंसिंग वाला वही के म्यूनिसिपल बॉन्ड एंड ऑल वो अर्बन डेवलपमेंट में कवर हुआ है. What do you think? एजुकेशन. एजुकेशन इज अ सेपरेट चैप्टर, यहाँ पे भी हो सकती है बात, बट वैसे रूरल डेवलपमेंट की प्रैक्टिकल प्रॉब्लम क्या है? माइग्रेशन में क्यों? माइग्रेशन, डू यू थिंक माइग्रेशन इज अ प्रॉब्लम? See, ultimately, if you read about migration, this is how cities develop. क्योंकि agriculture beyond a point does not provide you productivity, income does not rise. So if you want dynamic options, you'll have to move to the cities. नहीं, क्यों? अर्बनाइजेशन सस्टेनेबल तो हो सकता है ना. वो सस्टेनेबिलिटी की बात इन्होंने अर्बन डेवलपमेंट में बात की है. See, the biggest quality of education is again a problem. What do you mean inclusive? Yes. Yes. What do you mean by inclusive development? In rural development, mostly they will talk about though urban poverty is also a concept, but that is not well established in the country, as in बहुत recognized नहीं होता. There are schemes for urban poverty also, but rural poverty is a given. So in the last 75 years, we have had number of schemes on rural poverty. Can you give an example on poverty alleviation scheme in India on for especially rural? So Samitwa, yes. Samitwa के ऊपर इन्होंने 3 पेज किए कि टेक्नोलॉजी देखो कैसे अडॉप्ट हुई. Anything else? There are 2 types. I'll tell you one by one how exactly this discussion goes. In poverty, first, I will talk about how poverty has improved. I'll talk about data. That any particular segment you've picked up, ये एक मतलब analysis था जो अच्छा हो सकता था यहाँ पे, they did not do it. How do we measure poverty in the country? Now, do you realize that in poverty measurement itself is highly controversial? What was the last committee which had given a methodology for poverty estimation? The Rangarajan committee. Rangarajan committee is 2012. तो 2012 के बाद हमने कोई कमिटी एस्टैब्लिश नहीं की, और हम यूज कौन सी कमिटी करते हैं? तेंदुलकर. सो 2004-5 वाली कमिटी जिसका 2010 में डेटा आया है. सो स्टिल द मेथोडोलॉजी इज द सेम. So this is one particular topic which they would have presented a good analysis on how poverty should be measured in the country. But they missed the debate completely. What they instead did is, they said that data has improved. How? You can check the Tendulkar poverty line. You can check the World Bank poverty line. And third, you can also check the Niti Aayog, the multidimensional poverty index. तो इन तीनों के में क्या इंप्रूवमेंट आई है कंट्री में, उन्होंने वो पहले बता दिया, डेटा दिया 3 पेज तक. उससे पहले एवरी चैप्टर दे टॉक अबाउट व्हाट इज इंपॉर्टेंट. हियर दे टॉक्ड अबाउट पॉवर्टी. बिफोर दे एस्टैब्लिश व्हाट इज इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर पीपल इज सोशल मोबिलिटी. इंटरजेनरेशनल इंट्राजेनरेशनल मोबिलिटी इंपॉर्टेंट है. उस बंदे की लाइफ इंप्रूव होनी चाहिए अक्रॉस हिज एज, एंड ऑल्सो हिज लाइफ शुड इंप्रूव एज कंपेयर टू हिज प्रीवियस जनरेशन. So they establish, give 2-3 good paragraphs which can be used in the essays or even introduction of answers. ये social mobility important क्यों होती है किसी के लिए भी. Then they talk about how India has already done this. Poverty, extreme poverty is being reduced. I have given you data. Once I given you data, I will tell you how this happened. Now, what are the different schemes which will help solve poverty? There are 2 types of schemes which help solve poverty. One is wage employment. How do we give wage employment? Is when we employ people in government works, public works, and give them payment for it. What was the major scheme for wage employment? It was, ये अच्छा debate है ये. This is again one answer which is prepared in the survey. They saying Manrega was a success, but Manrega had reached its peak. Now Manrega required reforms. What reforms were required? The government has shifted to. Now they have explained in detail how this was now redundant and how these features are filling all of the redundancy here. So if the question in the paper, in paper 2 or paper 3 turns out that what exactly is the feature of the new bill and how does it improve the lacunas of the previous bill. So you have a prepared answer. ये tabular form में पूरा समझाया उन्होंने कि कैसे इसकी requirement थी, ये अब हो चुका था पूरा. Whatever we wanted from this is something we had already done. How else do we improve the poverty or improve social mobility for the people? व्हाट स्कीम? एक तो वेज एम्प्लॉयमेंट हो गई, उसके अलावा व्हाट टाइप? द सेकेंड टाइप ऑफ अ स्कीम इज सेल्फ एम्प्लॉयमेंट, that people can be employed themselves. Now what could be self employment schemes? एक ही स्कीम है, इंडिविजुअल को हम लोन देके काम करवा सकते हैं. What we have seen is individual loans don't turn out very well, so we have used the concept of, अब सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप के इन्होंने स्टेट स्पेसिफिक एग्जांपल दे दिए कि कैसे एक स्कीम बहुत सक्सेसफुल हुई है. उसके अलावा सेंटर ने सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप्स के लिए क्या किया है? दे हैव एक्सप्लेन्ड इन डिटेल अबाउट वन स्कीम, दैट इज नेशनल रूरल लाइवलीहुड मिशन, दीनदयाल उपाध्याय नेशनल रूरल लाइवलीहुड मिशन आजीविका. ये भी 2 दिन पहले ही मिनिस्टर ने भी बोली थी कि एनआरएलएम हैज क्रिएटेड अ लॉट ऑफ डिफरेंस. हाउ एनआरएलएम हैज क्रिएटेड डिफरेंस? इट बिल्ड्स स्किल and it also has a technology concept. They've talked about both building capacity and technology in detail. Capacity mein they have talked about how the tagline, what it says is, we need from participation to partnerships. Participatory governance ke upar they have written a whole thing covering capacity and technology both. So my whole rural development, one major chunk of rural development gets covered. Another chunk of rural development I can talk about. So one is this, second is self-help group. If you see number of questions paper 2, paper 3. Now they won't ask self-help group directly, they will definitely ask कि NRLM ने कैसे change किया. NRLM के features आएंगे. And in all of these questions, you'll never find reasons behind that poverty. You'll always find what is the government doing about poverty. These three are something which are prelim specific. All of the discussion is main specific. The 6 chapters which have been given in the last mostly are main specific only. Direct answers milenge. Finally, after rural infrastructure, they've also talked about a specific segment where people are poor and we need to improve their condition also. They've talked about sanitation workers. 3 paragraphs, waste management and sanitation workers के ऊपर लिखा है. This is something which is also ignored in most of the schemes, so this is something which you have to work on. So if you see again 5 things coming from rural development, starting from the change shift that happened from Manrega to the new bill, the self-help group and the success of self-help group, especially a state example. Kudumshri पे पूरा एक box है. Kudumshri and other state-specific examples of self-help groups. The features of the scheme, especially in capacity technology, then capacity and technology, otherwise also why it is important. Not just from coming from this scheme, otherwise also what is their relevance here. Rural infrastructure, sanitation workers, in sub mein they've also talked about building governance capacity at the bottom. ये सब manage कैसे होगा? A generic point है. So from the first employment and skilling, I told you how 5 and 4 themes. Now coming from rural development, these particular 4 and 5 themes. This is how the chapter has to be covered along with the topic. Reading it cover to cover is not going to give you a lot of benefits. Is this clear? Any doubts with respect to how this is covered? Now the next topic. इसके लिए you don't need anything else apart from this chapter. The evolution of AI. What do you think would be the topic question they could ask from this topic? अब AI related क्या question आ सकता है? Large language models, what exactly related to them? Misuse. Data localization, anything else? See, the first thing you said is misuse. अब वो newspaper पढ़ के misuse ही आएगा दिमाग में. वो लिखा ही क्योंकि analysis दिया ही ऐसा है ना वो. AI role in agriculture. और वो तो agriculture का topic होगा, technology in agriculture. See what they have done in AI, mostly again relevant for paper 2 and paper 3. First, what all do you know about AI? They have categorized this into what are the knowns of AI and what are the पहले समझो क्या हो क्या रहा है, We were not talking about AI before because it was still in nascent stage, but now we realize that AI, the evolution has happened so much that we have to talk about this. No longer is this technology peripheral. This is a core technology in which a lot of world is invested. So now India has to have some perspective on it. Now, what are the perspective on it? When they discuss these knowns and unknowns, they highlight 6 major issues that are present in AI debate. वो पूरा they frame these 6 issues, understanding the technology first. They said first issue is there has been development frontier technology कि हम आगे बहुत जा रहे हैं, but we don't know what exactly is its application. So they highlight 6 questions which there has to be a solution. We have developed the frontier in technology that what exactly can be done is increasing day by day, but how will it be used? We still don't have a clear answer. If you see Chat, GPT, and all these models being developed, they don't know how to build a product out of it. They are burning money in building AGI, but whatever developments they are getting, they are not able to put it to specific use. Application nahi bana pa rahe. That's the first question. Second question is, if we scale AI, we have a problem. What will happen to if we scale AI in terms of the intensity of what exactly the टेक्नोलॉजीज कंप्यूट की अगर हम इंटेंसिटी बढ़ाते हैं तो हमारे लिए एक और प्रॉब्लम है कि रिसोर्स कहाँ से आएगी शुड दिस टेक्नोलॉजी बी ओपन सोर्स और शुड इट बी प्राइवेट शुड इट बी डेवलप्ड इंडिया बीइंग अ सॉवरन कंट्री और देयर शुड बी इंटरकनेक्शंस ग्लोबल वैल्यू चेन्स कि कुछ पार्ट हम बनाए कुछ और बनाए whatever technology has been built there have been sharing also this is how globalization happened but considering the uncertainty this is something which we have to discuss. What exactly is sovereignty versus this? What should be the regulation of this? Considering regulation can stop. So, understanding the domain, they said there are 6 questions that need an answer. This is what the knowns and unknowns of the field are. These are the 6 particular trade offs, 6 particular controversial things coming out of AI. Now, once they establish this, then they say, what exactly is happening is US, specifically the West world, and what exactly is the development in India. They give certain examples of different companies and what exactly are they developing. Once they've done this, they talk about what exactly should be the governance and data frameworks in India. इसके वो सॉल्यूशंस देते हैं काफी सारे कि हमें कैसे उसको रेगुलेट करना है गवर्नेंस और डेटा फ्रेमवर्क क्या होंगे. This is one thing which they have talked about discussing the issues. After understanding the US and the present state of India, they highlight how the whole infrastructure has to be governed. Second, they talk about AI, whatever we are building, we also have certain safety and risk involved. And finally, if we talk about AI, what exactly happens to its localization? Here they talk about development of so anything related to paper 2 and paper 3 in terms of AI governance and what exactly are challenges, ethics के भी question है ना, तो वो इससे बाहर कहीं नहीं है. You read this one chapter on AI, you can complete paper 2, paper 3 answer. These are the dimensions which they have talked about, कि how this technology has become important. These are the issues coming out of it. And then this is your regulation with respect to governance, then regulation of data frameworks, how exactly are you going to ethically source the data, what are its safety and risk involved, and finally localization with respect to data centers. This is the entire coverage of the AI chapter talking about 3 major dimensions. अब paper 2 paper 3 में AI related governance issue का कुछ question आएगा तो solve हो जाएगा. Paper 3 में आएगा वहां से question solve हो जाएगा. इसका solution ये है. Is this making sense? This is how every chapter you're going to find these themes. 15th chapter. Urbanization, making India cities work for its citizens. What do you think are the issues being discussed here? Urbanization का problem क्या है? Law and order, pollution. Pollution का कोई mention नहीं किया इन्होंने. They've talked about other things, but pollution is something they've not discussed. This should have been discussed in detail. Some cities definitely face the problem of pollution. See, this is why I said analysis जो आपको newspaper से मिलेगा वो यहाँ नहीं है. Pollution का तो I think there would be a lot of analysis you'd get from the newspaper. Unplanned migration, anything else? Hygienic, anything else? Hygienic किस मामले में? वो थोड़ा सा discussed है. In what sense do you think hygienic? कुछ और hygiene कैसे, किस sense में? Yes. First, if I start with urbanization, they'll first explore what are the trends in urbanization. कैसे बढ़ रहा है, कितनी cities बढ़ रही हैं, migration कैसे हो रहा है और cities कैसे grow कर रही हैं. इस trend से they highlight one problem, and this is what they call as the paradox of urbanization. In paradox of urbanization, they say कि scale तो हो रहा है urbanization, though in the last 1 or 2 years or even 3 years, the scale has reduced. बहुत तेज speed पे नहीं हो रहा, कम speed पे हो रहा है, but urbanization हो रहा है. But the problem is this scale is not matched with what exactly is the productivity in the city and what exactly is the, ये चीजें improve नहीं हो रही हैं. So the urban centers are growing in number. They define census towns. They define how exactly is happening. In fact, trends say they show how exactly the scale is building. They've given a state-specific example in a box of Kerala. We want to understand the trend of urbanization. केरला का पूरा एक बॉक्स बना के उन्होंने बताया कि कैसे अर्बनाइजेशन बढ़ रहा है इसमें. प्रॉब्लम है कि प्रोडक्टिविटी नहीं है सिटी में और लिवेबिलिटी नहीं है. लिवेबिलिटी में दे हाईलाइट 3 इश्यूज. वन इज द इशू ऑफ कि हम लैंड को मोनेटाइज, ये 3 इश्यूज काफी डिटेल में डिस्कस हुए हैं कि वाई लैंड इज नॉट बीइंग मोनेटाइज, डील्स में प्रॉब्लम आती है, फिर हाउसिंग में प्रॉब्लम क्या आती है. दैट इज द फर्स्ट प्रॉब्लम. सेकंड प्रॉब्लम विच दे हैव डिस्कस्ड इन डिटेल इज the mobility in the city, transport and conveyance. And the third issue which they have talked about in detail is what is your waste management, and these are the 3 issues which they have picked up in terms of livability and productivity of the economy, especially the urban centers. These two have been talked about, especially in terms of productivity, how land value is not being unlocked in most of the urban centers because of a number of issues. Then they talk about mobility and conveyance related issues, and finally waste management and sustainability. ये वाले issues से pollution connect हो सकता था, but that is not very extensively covered. That you would always have. These 3 issues you can get. How to solve these issues? They have given cross-country examples, what different countries are doing, both cross-country and state-specific example. Once these 3 issues have been discussed, they have talked about the generic issues with urban development faces in the country. Urban development issue are with respect to these two in detail. Financing of urban local bodies, municipal bonds, and how exactly the devolution of funds happen. Governance or capacity related issues, how there is number. If you read about urban local bodies and rural local bodies, you'll find out the problem of 3 F's: funds, functions, and functionary. तो वो तीनों प्रॉब्लम यहाँ सॉल्व करी है. Financing separately, the functions and functionaries separately. This is what they have talked about. Again, the issues have not been discussed. What needs to be done is discussed along with the government steps being taken by different states. This is the how they have covered urban development. Mostly important for paper 2. Paper 3 में ऐसा कोई टॉपिक है नहीं खास. Paper 3 के टॉपिक्स पहले 3 थे: रूरल डेवलपमेंट, पॉवर्टी, unemployment, skilling and related topics. AI also, governance and paper 3 both. Is it clear? Then the last chapter, that is talking about what the fundamental problem which we are facing. In fact, ये urban infrastructure में, why do you think we have the problem of waste and sanitation? Waste management की problem है क्यों? Technology. What technology would you need? Technology, so any chapter will talk about technology और technology से improve कैसे करेगा. एक और major problem है कम्युनिटी पार्टिसिपेशन. दे से कि सिविक सेंस नहीं है. इन्होंने डिटेल में बोला है कि इंडिया में सिविक सेंस नहीं है. और दूसरा, इफ एनीथिंग इज एग्जिस्टिंग इनफॉर्मल इन द कंट्री, वी से इनफॉर्मल इज बैड एंड ट्राई टू टॉक अबाउट रिमूविंग द इनफॉर्मल थिंग्स. फॉर एग्जांपल द स्लम्स, वी से दिस इज बैड एंड उसको फिर डिस्ट्रॉय, बुलडोजर से उनको हटा के ब्यूटिफिकेशन ऑफ द सिटी. दे से वी डोंट हैव टू रिमूव द इनफॉर्मल, वी हैव टू इंटीग्रेट द इनफॉर्मल. So they move away from removal of informality to integration of informality, and at the same time building civic sense. How do we take ownership and responsibility of the city as a community as a whole? So what builds that the civic sense? Very important for paper 4 and also paper 2, because governance related questions yahin se aate hain. So they talk about building all that because these 3 problems, when they highlight this problem of not having civic sense and how to bring this social capital forward. Is it making sense? Now what is the theme of this survey? फर्स्ट चैप्टर क्या प्रीफेस है किस बारे, ये तो हर साल बात कर सकते हैं हम इन टॉपिक्स की, अर्बनाइजेशन, रूरल डेवलपमेंट, एम्प्लॉयमेंट एंड इवन एआई, वी कैन टॉक अबाउट एवरी, व्हाट एग्जैक्टली इज द फंडामेंटल प्रॉब्लम? Global uncertainty in what terms? What is happening geopolitically? This is part one and part two. Part one is policy, what the government needs to do. Part two is how to implement it. State capacity is part two. Part one is the issues which we have and how we, issue wise, what should the policy be. What exactly is the uncertainty about? Uncertainty हो कैसे रही है? Multipolar world, especially in terms of economics. There was a whole era of hyper globalization, and now we've shifted from hyper globalization to, हम वही करेंगे जो हमारी कंट्री का फायदा होगा, फॉरगेट व्हाट इज द बेनिफिट ऑफ द इंटायर वर्ल्ड. अर्लियर द आइडिया वाज दैट वी नीड टू बेनिफिट एवरीवन. कन्वर्जेंस आइडिया था. कन्वर्जेंस इज इफ समवन हैज grown up too much, you have to catch up. Urban area is growing too much, some states are growing too much, the poorer states will catch up at a faster pace. Similarly, development in the globe is lopsided. Some countries, western countries, have increased their development, now other countries are going to catch up, तो हम उनको हेल्प करेंगे. वो कन्वर्जेंस में वो हाइपर ग्लोबलाइजेशन था. अब ये हो गया है strategic globalization, and this is why in the first chapter they talk about economics coming to the center, and the term mentioned is economic statecraft. ये कैसे states ने economy को use करते हुए strategically globalization में part ले रहे हैं. Tariffs, the dual use regulation policy, the end use policy, number of different concepts which are coming up in order to stop anyone from using your technology, whether it is on resource or technological front. अब tight competition हो गया है. जो पहले cost पे competition था, वो अब strategic competition हो गया. Cost is not the important factor. Competitiveness is not the important factor. Strategically, what is important is what exactly is going to matter. This is why even US is trying to shift the semiconductor manufacturing chain to someone who is nearer or to their own shores. जो पहले offshoring हो रही थी, now it is nearshoring or reshoring. Friendly countries में we are going to start that manufacturing capacity. This is the domain. Now the last two chapters says, if this is the domain, what the country needs to do. So in this particular domain, they first mention what are the reforms the country has done. That is, they have achieved macroeconomic stabilization. But these reforms are not enough to give you certainty in this environment. So they talk about two things. Reforms already done, but these reforms are not going to give you particular reward in terms of the uncertainties. So uncertainties explain करी सारी. ये issue बन गया, ये issue बन गया.
Most aspirants think revision means reading the same books again and again, highlighting lines, turning pages, hoping it sticks. But real revision doesn't work like that. Revision is not about rereading, it's about recall, connections and practice. If you can't recall an answer without opening the book, it won't help in the exam hall. True revision is about connecting concepts, simplifying them through mind maps, and strengthening recall with repeated MCQ practice. That's where structured revision makes a difference. The quick revision classes for prelims starting 20th January at 2 p.m. are designed exactly for this. Focused revision through core topics, smart consolidation, mind map based clarity, and MCQ driven practice. With 40 intensive classes, the program ensures complete coverage of high yield areas, helping you revise efficiently and recall with confidence when it matters the most. Because in prelims, success does not come from reading again, it comes from remembering faster and applying better. To know more, visit our website or call us on the given number.
तो हमने सब कुछ सही करने के बाद भी your good behavior is not going to be rewarded anymore because everybody is taking care of their own interest. So now India also has to shift strategically how exactly it engages with the world. How exactly domestic policy has to shift in terms of the evolving global environment. These are the last two chapters. ये बहुत एक अच्छा question last year आया था that if US is increasing tariffs and there is protectionism world over, what do you think the country should do? Third question in GS3, 10 marks. Now this is a broad question, meta question. अब ये मेटा क्वेश्चन का आंसर 16.1 चैप्टर करता है. उसका इंप्लीमेंटेशन जो पेपर 2 के लिए इंपॉर्टेंट है वो दैट इज 16.2. व्हाट दे से Focus on first, what are the policy recommendation, and they explain in detail, giving different strategies for different environments. First thing they say, you have to be very tactical about how you are going to become indigenous. इसके तीन सिनारियो बनाए. फर्स्ट सिनारियो में कंप्लीट इंडिजनाइजेशन, सेकंड सिनारियो में यू कैन डेवलप ऑन द वर्ल्ड बट फ्रेंडली कंट्रीज, एंड थर्ड में हाउ यू हैव टू मेंटेन रिलेशंस वेयर यू सोर्स योर क्रिटिकल मटेरियल्स. सो इफ यू हैव टू बिकम आत्मनिर्भर, किस स्टेज पे किस जगह पे आत्मनिर्भर हो गया वो एकदम क्लियर नहीं होगा. सो आत्मनिर्भर भारत पॉलिसी इन 2020 इज नॉट गोइंग टू वर्क थ्रू आउट. देयर हैज टू बी सम टैक्टिकल चेंजेस विच यू हैव टू मेक when you are becoming indigenized. The second thing which they talk about in detail is they talking about input cost reduction. That how exactly the country has to reduce its input cost in terms of most of its manufacturing. And this is where they say competitiveness is something which should be called as an infrastructure. कि हम हाई कॉस्ट मैन्युफैक्चरिंग अब नहीं कर सकते बिकॉज वी हैव टू चेंज अकॉर्डिंग टू द चेंजिंग ग्लोब. थर्ड थिंग दे से, पिछला जो ग्लोबलाइजेशन का बेनिफिट था वो उनको मिला जिन्होंने इनपुट कॉस्ट कम की हुई थी. चाइना हैज गॉट मोस्ट ऑफ द ग्लोबल वैल्यू चेन्स बिकॉज दे आर फाइटिंग ऑन एफिशिएंसी. No longer are the countries fighting on efficiency. What the country needs to engage is in advanced manufacturing, high value chains. Technology mein, up the technology chain, you have to now invest in your capabilities. And this is, all these three are going to require a change in the state capacity, where they mention the word entrepreneurial state. अब आपको facilitate से आपने regulate किया, फिर आपने 20 साल 91 के बाद बोला हम facilitate करेंगे. अब facilitate नहीं, सिर्फ enable करना है. What you have to enable? You have to work on all three. They give strategies how to build these three. So this is a meta narrative which they are talking about. By first mentioning macroeconomic stability, Goldilocks zone को पूरा explain किया. Uncertainties क्या आ रही हैं, यहाँ पे बहुत सारी partnerships and initiatives they have mentioned. The third is what they have given you a strategy, what you need to do. This is what gives you marks in the paper. That what exactly the country can do. This is where the chapter is important. Use these particular domains in writing essays also, how we can navigate in an uncertain world. Navigation in the uncertain world is going to require this. When you read this chapter, you'll find out कि कैसे different strategies बनी हैं. Now, how exactly this will be done? How can this be implemented? This is the second part of last chapter. They are talking about, now what exactly do we say when we talk about state capacity? One is, what exactly is your capacity with respect to policy making? And second is your capacity with respect to how exactly your people are working, that is. तो गवर्नेंस और ह्यूमन कैपिटल का ऑर्गेनाइजेशन कैसे बेटर करोगे अक्रॉस सेंटर एंड स्टेट्स. They are not talking about building this state capacity in vacuum. They say that this particular state capacity can be built because we have seen, यहाँ पे again they make a box and they talk about East Asian countries and their development. How did the East Asian countries, specifically China, South Korea, Taiwan, all of these countries, how did they build this capacity? So they give this example how these countries had induced competition through exports and merging in the global value chains. तो वो दो बात उसी से में ये बात करते हैं कि ये इस चीज को आप तभी कर पाओगे when you are able to scale along with discipline of the outside world. Discipline comes from competition. So when they give the different measures in how to build that statecraft, they also talk about East Asian examples, how they were successful, in doing this, and also how they build that scale plus discipline. तो पूरा बताएंगे कि थोड़ा सा आपका फेलियर है तो यू हैव टू नाउ प्रमोट फेलियर, यू कांट जस्ट गिव अवे विद इट. नंबर ऑफ डिफरेंट थिंग्स, हाउ यू कैन नर्चर योर एंटरप्राइज. तो वो पूरा एंटरप्रेन्योरियल स्टेट बनेगा कैसे, उसका एक्सप्लेनेशन है दिस लास्ट चैप्टर. बट बनना क्यों चाहिए, क्योंकि हमारी वो प्रॉब्लम है और ये पॉलिसी है. बनेगा कैसे इज द लास्ट चैप्टर. इनफैक्ट दे डिड दिस होल सेक्शन ऑन सेइंग दैट आरटीआई नीड्स रिफॉर्म. तो एक पेपर 2 का और कॉन्सेप्ट डाल दिया कि ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में गवर्नेंस में आरटीआई भी एक हिकअप है. This needs reform if you want to be moving like this along with the global challenges that are coming. This is your overview of the last 6 chapters of the economic survey. Is this making sense how the survey has to be done? Last 6 chapters और इसके पिछले chapters भी ऐसे हैं जिसका बहुत content organized नहीं है. जो पहले 5 chapter हैं वो macroeconomics है, वो understanding based है. तो उसका क्वेश्चन इतना चैलेंजिंग नहीं आएगा जितना लास्ट 12 चैप्टर्स का आएगा. स्पेसिफिकली आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट राइटिंग आंसर्स इन मेंस. If you break up the chapters like this, pick up small topics, this becomes a very easy document to prepare. If you read it cover to cover without having an understanding how to use it and what is being discussed, you will never make sense of what is happening. चाहे आप कितनी बार पढ़ लो उसको. I hope this overview has given you some sense of what exactly is happening. In case you have doubts, thank you.